Hello, Happy New Year and welcome to this first flight of 2022. Welcome to the airport of Heraklion here. We'll have a closer look when we go to our plane here. So this first flight of the year we'll try to do a short flight. Heraklion to Rhodes. Quite a lovely flight. Not a lot of time in the air, so we'll try to do most of the preparations up front while we are loading the plane and setting up all the instruments in the cockpit. No champagne in the cockpit today, but maybe after landing we'll go for a little drink and maybe a swim in the water. So here's our plane in the Aegean livery. The doors are open already, but we'll wait a little bit before we request the passengers to come. Baggage is also in. The plane is here, parked overnight, and we'll have to look at everything from loading the fuel, boarding passengers, setting up everything before we take off and head towards Rhodes. So let's jump into the cockpit now. We'll do this flight using all the kind of checklists that are provided by the FlyByWire team. This is of course the A320 from FlyByWire. And with those checklists I will project them on the screen from time to time. We walk through the different stages of the flight to make sure we didn't forget anything major. But before the flight we'll first get the weather, so we are a bit clear on the runways to use and what to expect for the landing as well. So I've set up all the flight planning in SimBrief. I'll have a separate video on this, so if you subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications bell, you'll see when that video is being posted. It will be a basic introduction to the use of SimBrief within Flight Simulator here. So in the FlyByWire flight pad, as I call it, the electronic flight bag, we can see on the dashboard an empty screen, and on the bottom there's a little button from SimBrief, so we can load our plan already in the electronic flight bag. So this is the flight number 02. We go from Heraklion to Rhodes, and we're using real-time weather. The times here are not correct. That's from when the flight was planned. So. But it doesn't really matter for the flight at all. There's an alternate airport, Antalya in Turkey. We also see the zero fuel weight, average wind, the cost index that we will be using, and the cruise flight level. But what we were here for is of course the weather, so I'll note this down into a little piece of paper for myself. In Heraklion, QNH 1022, wind 330, 14 knots. That's quite a bit of wind, and 16 degrees is the temperature. In Rhodes we'll have a 1018 for the QNH, 320 wind, which is to be expected more or less if it's not so far away from here, so the wind will be more or less the same. And 17 degrees is the temperature. Alright, so with the weather we can now start setting up the cockpit. The checklists that we have, I will quickly project them. With those checklists, you first have a cockpit pre-flight check, then a cockpit preparation check. Next is then the pre-startup, so that's the point where we'll start. Well, we'll make sure that we're ready to start the engines. But first we'll do a quick cockpit pre-flight check. So we just check if all the levers are in the right place, more or less. We'll make sure the parking brake is set to on, that the flaps are retracted, the spoilers are retracted and disarmed, the weather radar is off, predictive wind shear is also off. The engine master switches are off and the mode selector is in normal thrust levers are idle. We can have a quick test with that. I'm using a separate thrust master controller, so you won't see me go with the mouse to any of those toggles. And when I move the thrust levers here, you see them move, of course, in the plane. But they are back to idle now. Gears down, which we have here, and wipers are off. This can be seen on the overhead panel, so the wipers are here off. It's an important check to make sure that when we power up the airplane, the wipers don't start scratching the windshield when doing so. So this is the pre-flight checklist complete. Next is the cockpit preparation checklist, and that will walk through all the elements to really start and configure the airplane for startup. All right. We'll go to the overhead panel and we'll check if we have external power available. So we have this, and we can connect the external power to the airplane. That's the first step that we do. Then we also switch on batteries 1 and 2. That's the first part of the overhead. The rest, we first turn on the instrument brightnesses, just make sure we can see our screens. Also on this side we will increase the brightness a little bit, definitely with a lot of sun. We should have some contrast so we can see that. There is also 2 brightness knobs here. That's for the floodlights, and this one is for the backlight of the buttons, just to make sure that that's also there. The MCU also has a brightness tab, which you can configure there. And that's the majority of it. We go back to the overhead panel to do the rest of the flow. We want to use the APU, and we will need to use the APU, of course, to start the engines. And for this, we also test the APU. Oh, this was not the button. It's very close to each other here. So you press the test button, and you hear the sound. And then you know, okay, APU is tested, and it's okay. I'll also start the APU already. So master switch on, and 3 seconds later we can press the start button. So now the generator in the back is going to start. This can also be followed on the instrument displays here. The APU page comes up, and you see the turbine rotation increasing. You see the exhaust gas temperature is increasing as well. So this is a normal startup of APU. And at some point we'll get the available light over there, but we don't have to really wait for it. We'll use it a bit later. In the meantime, we do the rest of the flow. We make sure the crew supply, oxygen crew supply is on. We can do a test of the cockpit's voice recorder. And then we'll set our aiders to nav. So this will align the inertial reference platforms. Takes a bit of time, takes about 7 minutes for it to align, so always good to do it as soon as you can. So now we can switch on a couple of lights. The nav and the wing lights, they go on. Seatbelt sign, we put it to on. They were already on apparently. No smoking, we put to auto, and the emergency exit lights we put to arm. So these will light up in case of emergency. The annunciator lights, we can test it. We can see the entire panel now having lights, that's good. Probe and window heat to auto. APU available, so we can turn on the APU bleed. This will be needed to start the engines. The air conditioning temperatures we can set them as we want, but that's okay for now. We turn the fuel pumps on. We'll also test the engine fire systems. So engine 1 fire, similar as the APU, press the test button, and also this one works fine. So that's all of the overhead panel Done. We can go back to our cockpit front view. Now we would configure this part. So the QNH we can set up. Also here are a couple of lights that we can, knobs that we can use to increase the brightness of the light. So let's do that already. The QNH in Heraklion, as we noted down, is 1022, and we put it in this window. Constraint to enable. We also put that on the first officer's side. Flight directors are on. And the arc is set to 10 nautical miles for takeoff, of course. FCU speeds, we will put it in. This I will put in a bit later when I've configured the rest of the airplane and that we know which departure we're going to take. So now it's time to set up the MCDU. Alright, the MCDU, we first start on this side. We go to the ATSU page, AOC menu, and on the init screen we will request our initial data. This is also coming from SimBrief, so that's quite handy. The same data goes in here. We see that we have 3.5 tons of fuel on board. This will have to be corrected later on. Then, according to the flight plan and the fuel log that we have from SimBrief, estimated time 36 minutes en route. So that's good. Let's get the fuel in as well at this point, because normally fueling you wouldn't do with passengers on board. So before we can get the passengers, the fuel would have to be in. To fuel the plane, we go again to the flypad here, and on the dispatch tab we have the operational flight plan, which has a first section called Plan Fuel. It details the amount of fuel needed for each section of the flight and the legal needs for the additional fuel. So trip fuel of 1.7 tons. That's the amount of fuel you would burn for just doing the trip. Contingency fuel, 15 minutes, is 700 kilos. Fuel to go to the alternate is 1715 kilos again, so 1.7 ton to go to Antalya. There's some reserve that we put in, so our minimum takeoff fuel would be 5.27 tons. No extra fuel taken on board. Takeoff fuel 5.27 tons, and then we have some 200 kilos to taxi to the beginning of the runway, so 5.5 tons is the amount of fuel that we would need. So if you compare it to the amount for the trip, 5.5 compared to 1.7 is quite a big reserve that we have. So here we can put it to 5.5. Or if it's not easy to really enter, using the slicer, we can also just put in 5.5 tons over here, and then we click on play to continue the refueling. It's in real-time fueling mode, so this will take a bit of time. It seems 3 minutes to fuel. And we can see the fuel going up here. Going back to the MCDU, while this is in progress, you see this number also increasing, so that's quite okay. Let's go to the data page to start the first section of the setup here. In data you have all kinds of ways to monitor positions of the IRSs and GPS, so that's interesting, but the main page that we want to look at here is the aircraft status, which has which type of engine it is, but also the active period for the navigation aids database. So from 30th December to 26th of January, that's perfect. It's the newest AirX cycle that's in. There's no stored waypoints or routes in here, so that's also okay. We could clear them out if necessary over here, but we are having a valid database. That's the most important point here. Next we go to the init page. Also here we do an init request, and this will initialize all the points from the flight plan into our flight management system. This is the route from Heraklion to Rhodes. Ontario has the alternate flight number. Flight level 230 is the one that we're using today. So next is the flight plan itself, and here we will have to put in our correct departure procedure and also arrival procedure. And let's do that now. For these procedures and for the flight plan, I'm using Navigraph. And in this plugin, you can already see the route that has been loaded in. So this is Heraklion, here we have Rhodes, and that's the route planned with the arrival procedure on a turnaround to get to the runway 24 in Rhodes. And here we take off from runway 27 and follow the departure to go to our next waypoint over here. So the route is on top, Heraklion, runway 27, Labu 1 Charlie departure, and then we end up in Labux. We take the Victor 57, or the upper Victor 57 in this case, to DELAX. From there we take the Victor 57 to TPAS, Victor 57 Rupum LOKNA, and in LOKNA we start LOKN2G arrival to runway 24 in Rhodes. So what we need to know is our departure, which is this Labux 1 Charlie. We'll do a briefing a bit later. So to set it up, click on the airport departure from runway 27, and we'll go and find this Labu 1 Charlie, put it in, click on insert, and we have the different waypoints for this departure. We can verify a little bit on the plan here, but it has a turn at above 600 feet to the right, and then we'll intercept a radial from a certain VOR. We'll go over that in a second. So this ends in Labux, as we saw in the plan just now. We can clear the discontinuity, as the next waypoint is indeed DELAV. And from LOKNA, here we take the arrival to Rhodes, so we click on destination, select the arrival, and we'll do an ILS 24 Yankee arrival today with the LOKNA 2 Golf Star. The LOKNA 2 Golf Star is discharged, so we'll arrive in LOKNA at some point, and there we continue for 11 nautical miles, turn right and follow an arc of 13 nautical miles around the Papa Alfa Romeo VOR, the Rhodes VOR, to go to our initial approach fix, which is Texas. From there we'll fly the ILS approach, ILS Yankee, and that's this chart. So we have Texas initial approach fix. Here we go to this point, still on the arc, 13 nautical miles from Rhodes VOR, and intercept the localizer and the glide slope over here. We'll go into more detail a bit later. But okay, so that's the LOKNA 2 Golf Star. So this one also insert. We go back to our flight plan and see indeed LOKNA. Then we have a point 11 nautical miles further from LOKNA. And then here there's no real description on the arc, so it goes immediately to one of the first point of the ILS approach and the final point of the ILS approach. So in between here we'll have to fly the arc manually. And I'll set it up a bit later in flight so that we can use the fix info page, which is something quite handy for doing this. Alright, flight plan is in, RATNAV 4, departing. Let's go back to the chart here. The departure, the Labux 1 Charlie departure in the Heraklion airport is described below. So one of the things to notice already, there's a 6,000 feet for a transition altitude, where we go from altitude to flight levels. The airport is at 115 feet elevation, so that's good. Let's turn the map so we can see more detail of the procedure here. So after takeoff, return. After takeoff here, return to the right, and it's at 600 feet that we will make this turn already. Maximum 210 knots, so that's good to put into the FCU. 210 knots, bank angle of 15 degrees, and we turn to 107 degree track. With this track, we will then intercept the 062 radial from the Heraklion VOR, India Romeo Alpha. So we will need this VOR to base our navigation on, so we'll put it in the RadNav page in a second. From here we will just continue climbing. At this point, which is 27 DME from Heraklion, we have to be above flight level 70, and as you see, flight levels 70, so no altitudes anymore above 6,000 feet. And we continue 9 miles to Lubbock, where we will join Victor 57. There's other departures on here, but they are not relevant to us. So what's also important to note is the minimum safe altitudes here. We have a sector of 10,000 feet to the southwest of the Heraklion VOR. So of course this is the island and the high mountains over there. That's why we also do a turn to the right and avoid any kind of terrain. Here we still have a 7,000 feet minimum safe altitude. On the northeast, where we're going to, is already 4,000. So it's good to be have a bit of situational awareness. The procedure is also described here. So the Lubbock 1 Charlie is climbed straight ahead 600 feet, turn right, 107 degrees track, intercept Heraklion radial 062. The Lubbock, and then join Victor 57. So we'll use this to put in our MCDU. The VOR that we wanted to use is this India Romeo Alpha. The course where we have to intercept it is 062. I'll also put it up in the second one, so we can use it to have a bit of again situational awareness. Most probably we can already turn on the autopilot before any of those are really necessary to use, but let's configure correctly. So that's it. There's no NDBs necessary here. So after the RadNav page, we go back to the init page and we go to init B. The 0 fuel weight we can put in. We just click on this button and it has the 0 fuel weight. The block fuel we have now 5.5 tons. So this we can also put in here. Of course, we have to key it in 5.5 and put it in the block fuel. And we'll go on and do the fuel calculations. What I'll also do already is have the passengers board, as we also need some passengers now. This can be done using the weight balance option here. Let me first get the staircase for the passengers out. So you'll see they're putting the stairs in place now. We have an open door at the back, open door at the front. So once we can now give the signal to load the passengers on board. So we request the amount of passengers that we wanted. 174 are in the flight log, and we can start the boarding process now, which also takes a little bit of time. So in the meantime, we continue the setup of our instrumentations. So we were at the init B page with a few predictions. So now we can go to the performance page. For our takeoff of runway 27, we'll use 1 degree of flaps. We put a 55 degree flex temperature in. Transition altitude of 6,000 feet, which is what we noted in the log, and then we can calculate the V1, V rotate and V2 speeds in here. You'll see those speeds adjusting still, so I think that's related to the boarding process, which is still ongoing. So I'll come back to this page when passengers are on board, and we'll recalculate the V speeds as well. Next, we can also already put in. So this is the climb phase. We'll not put anything in here. We have cruise mode for the climb, for the cruise, of course, descent mode. And then the last phase is the approach phase. So here we can already put in the QNH of Rhodes, which was 1018. A temperature of 17 degrees. And a magnetic wind of 320-5. Transition altitude in Rhodes is 6,000 feet, but we'll verify this on the arrival chart as well. So transition altitude 6,000, we'll put that in. And here our minimum descent altitude. Let's also have a look at our charts for the ILS. So the ILS, the decision altitude is in the minima down below. For the rest here, we can note that there's 5,500 feet minimum safe altitude southwest of the Rhodes VOR. Again, we have the transition altitude of 6,000 feet. These heights we will monitor during our approach. So at 7 nautical miles from from the VOR, we have to be at 1,600 feet, 6 nautical miles, 1,356 feet, and so on. So we'll monitor that as we come in for landing. Here in short is a missed approach procedure. It's depicted here with the lines. We'll review that in flight. But basically it's a climb straight ahead to 12 nautical miles from the VOR, then a right turn of maximum 185 knots to intercept and follow the 265 radial inbound to Rhodes VOR, and then climbing 4,000 feet. And then here we turn right to intercept the 121 radial outbound of the Rhodes VOR to enter the holding. So until we are here at 16 nautical miles from Rhodes, then we are in the holding pattern, and from there we can then join the approach again when we're cleared by ATC. Here we have a short description of this missed approach procedure. So it's the lighting system that there is, and so it's straight ahead 12 nautical miles from the VOR. Then we start the rest of the procedure, but by then you can read what's already in the rest of the procedure. Straight landing for the ILS with a full lighting system, so not with part of it out. Full lighting system. There's the decision altitude that we were looking for, which is 220 feet. So this one we'll put in here, 220 feet. And let's have a look if the passengers have now boarded. Yeah, so everything is green. We have the total amount of passengers on board, so we'll recalculate those performance speeds again. So instead of 121, it's 133. This will be 134, and the V2 is at 138, so it's more plausible for the amount of weight on board. Good. What we also can do is request the weather again from here this time, because we will also want to request it in flight. It's a METAR, not an ATS, but it's good enough for our purposes. We've requested the 3 important airports for our flight immediately together, so we can send this out, and then we'll get a page or a message in a couple of seconds with those 3 weather reports. So in the received messages you will then suddenly see a message appearing. Passenger on board, so we'll also close the back door. The stairs are gone. Let's have a look. There's the meter. So for Heraklion we have a wind from 3404 knots, so that's improved. And it's 16 degrees, that's still the same. QNH 1021 instead of 022, so we'll correct that. Next in Rhodes we have the 330 and we have 5 knots wind, so also there the wind shifted a little bit. There's a few clouds. 18 degrees is temperature, and QNH 1018, that's the same. So that's good. We go back to our performance page, and for the approach we can update that information quickly. So the QNH remains the same, the wind was 3305 knots. And temperature is 18 degrees. Good. Alright, the performance we did, so I think we set up everything on our flight here. Let's go back to the checklists. So MCDU data has been checked, MCDU is set up, the RADNAV is set up, IFR clearance, we have received it, IRS line is completed, and normally there's a message here saying IRS line in progress, and you will not have any displays here, so that's correct. Flight plan is checked. If his navits are required, we'll also switch on our VRs so that they become visible on the navigation display. Takeoff briefing is completed. Squawk, imagine it's set. So that's a preparation checklist completed. Pre-startup checklist. APU master is on. APU is started. MCDU weights are inserted. MCDU takeoff performance is checked. V speeds are calculated. APU bleed is on. External power is not off yet. We'll turn off the external power. And then the last one, air conditioning as required. Okay, pre-startup checklist complete. So we can start the pushback and startup checklist now when we're ready to do so. So a quick look around here. Alright, let's get going. Windows and door are closed. Cockpit door is not closed yet, but we'll close it now. That's over here, cockpit door is closed. Fuel pumps are on. The beacon will turn it on, so signaling that we will start our engines. Starting pin inserted, transponder to auto. TCAS to standby, and the clock we can set it to run, which will keep track of how long the plane has been active. Parking brake as required, and then when we're clear for the engine start, which we assume we are, we can move the engine mode selected to ignition, start, and engine master 2 on. So we can follow the startup of the engines on this page in the cockpit. Also here we monitor the engine parameters during startup. N2 is at 21% at the moment, and around 24-25% the fuel flow will come in. There's the fuel flow, EGT rises. and the N1 will also start increasing until the engine becomes available. Let's have a quick look from the outside. Here we see the engine number 2 spooling up. Gorgeous island. Always nice to be there. And there's the available message. We can start the engine number 1 now. You hear the sound of the power transfer unit. That's normally not audible in the cockpit, but it's a very recognizable sound for the passengers. So there you have it. Again here, N2 24%, there will be fuel flow coming in, and also EGT rising, N1 rising. And you see the first engine starting up now. The ignition is off, so we could set the mode selector ready to normal again, but let's wait until we have full start of the engine. 16, 17, 18, 19%, and there's the available message. So we move the engine mode selector to normal again. We can also get rid now of the APU bleed, because the engine are providing the bleed air. APU master switch can go off. Anti-ice that's required, so now the APU will power down, and this will go from available to off. And that's the startup checklist complete. So next we're ready to taxi actually. Let's put in the right flight controls now. Let's select our flaps 1 for takeoff. Let's also arm the ground spoilers. Put the auto brakes to max. And let's also check our flight controls, which we can also follow here on the screen. We can go to flight control. We can go to flight control page. We do rudder to full left, works rudder full right, aileron full left, aileron full right, elevator up, and elevator down. So that's also checked. So before taxi checklist is auto brake max, spoilers armed, flaps to takeoff position, engine anti-ice as required. Flight controls are checked, steering pin removed, pitch trim. We'll have to set the pitch trim still, which we can find here. Center of gravity to 4.5%. And then we can verify that over here. Easy to see the display now. To 4.5 must be here. All right, good. Rudder trim is reset. We can also do the resets. By pressing here, and then the steering pin is removed before taxi checklist complete. Alright, so we're ready to taxi now. Let's turn on the nose wheel taxi lights, runway takeoff lights, the stroke to auto. This one I will also increase. We don't really need it, but it's better to make sure it's there. Alright, so taxi, before taxi checklist. Taxi checklist, nose lights are taxi, runway turn off lights are on, the strobes are auto, parking brake is off, and our takeoff configuration, we can still push the button, which shows that it's normal. Predictive wind shear will go in orange, but we only turn it on during taxi. Alright, so let's head over to the runway. We advance the thrust levers a little bit. It's moving, and then the plane keeps moving by itself. And we'll even increase speed as we go. So we're heading out to the runway 27 here in Heraklion. You can see that on the airport map. Make sure to stay a bit on the center line in the background. So we were parked here. I can show the position of the aircraft. So here we're rolling on the taxiway. We'll cross this runway, and then we go to the start of runway 27. We'll keep our speed a little bit in check. 16 knots is okay. But for turns you would want to be at 10-15 knots, something like this. Let's notify the flight crew that we are going to take off.
Flight attendants, please prepare for takeoff.
There's a plane doing a bit of acrobatics. Or what would you call these? Let's slow down a little bit. 22 knots is a bit too much. Okay. Let's turn on the weather radar and the predictive wind shear in the meantime. We'll hold at this line before entering the runway. We'll put the parking brake on again and do our last checks. Let's turn on the landing lights, nose wheel light to take off. So before takeoff checklist, cabin crew is notified, external lights are all on, nose wheel lights is to take off, anti-ice is required, PAX is required, TCAS, we'll put the TCAS to our TARA, weather radar is on, predictive wind shear is on, and the weather mode is as required. Takeoff memo no blue, and that's correct here. So parking brakes off, before takeoff checklist complete, and let's head over to the runway and take off. There's nobody in the landing stages and nobody on the other side of the runway either. That's a bit of a strange thing on the flight plan. And let's try to use as much of the runway as possible. Nope, that could have been better. Alright. Then we'll start the chrono. We'll advance the thrust levers to 40%, let the engine stabilize. And then we go to flex thrusts. Keep the side stick forward. Between 80 knots and 100 knots, we gently pull back on the side stick. Release the back pressure, and then here we have E1. Can rotate, pitch up to about 10-15 degrees. Positive rate, gear up. And above 600 feet, we turn right. To 107 degrees. And here we should keep the speed to 210. Levers to climb position. Bank should be between 10 and 20, so 15 degrees bank. Show the star again, the SID again. So we're here in this section now, 107 to intercept the 062 radio. I'll just put it up there. Flaps can come up. And I'll switch to VOR mode so we can see the intercept for the for the procedure. See the other needles turning, so showing the position of the VOR. So once they're more or less here, we'll see this needle move closer, and then we have to turn left to the 062. We're above 6,000 feet, so we can go to the standard flight levels. And I can also enable the autopilot. Now the speed restriction is gone. The autopilot is a bit aggressive. Let's do the rest of the flight of the approach, of the departure manually. So we're overshooting this radio at the moment because the autopilot was turning us in the wrong direction. We can disarm the spoilers already. And let's wait to intercept this the needle now. It's moving ever so slightly. Let's assume we are clear to flight level 230. Let's to the right, so we are able to follow the radio now. Okay, we're 11 nautical miles from Heraklion VOR. So 27 nautical miles we will be at this point. And that's where we have to be below, above flight level 70, which is already the case. We are flight level 120. We can turn off the landing lights now, as well as the nose wheel lights, runway turn-off lights. And let's have a look at our navigation display. And we seem to be straight on the line that we had to be on, so that's good. I will enable the autopilot, but I will try to make sure that we can avoid any special turns. So let's do a direct to Labux, and then we enable the autopilot. Let's add some range. So we already see Labux coming in here at about 20 nautical miles from us now, and then DELAV is the next one. So good, let's have a look at the entire route now. LOKNA is here at more or less 110 nautical miles from where we are. So to make sure that we don't have any surprises at the approach phase, let's calculate our top of descent, assuming we'll be at flight level 230 in a little while. I'll turn off the seatbelt signs first, release the passengers. Good. To calculate the top of descent, we will have a look at our charts here. For this LOKNA 2 Golf arrival, we would have to be above 6,000 feet for the section between Nokla and the next point. 6,000 feet on this part of the arc. 5,000 feet here, 5,000 there, 4,000 here. So we descend slowly, going to our initial approach fix. So we will aim to be at LOKNA at around 6,000. If we're higher, of course, it's not so much of a problem, but not at 20,000 feet. So LOKNA, we want to be there on around about 6,000 feet. So how do we calculate this? We go to the performance page, and there's a top of descent calculation possibility. So let's say that we are at flight level 230 and you want to get to 6,000 with a normal 3-degree angle. You would need about 50 nautical miles, 53 nautical miles before the target. So 53 nautical miles before LOKNA we would have to do our descent, which is good. We can monitor how far we are from LOKNA by going to the progress page, and here we can enter LOKNA. in this this field. So now we know we're 97 nautical miles to Lokna, minus 53. We should be at 43 nautical miles when we start our descent. Two more things that we can add to our flight plan to make it more helpful is using the fixed info page to add this 30 nautical miles arc around the Papa Alpha Romeo VOR, the Rhodes VOR. This helps us make sure to stay on the right line, because we will fly that manually. The autopilot doesn't really support that yet. So 30 nautical miles radius. When we add this, we'll see here a little arc going in there. The other one that might be interesting to add, we can add another fix, is again the Lokna, but so this time we'll enter the Lokna and we want to start our descent around 43 nautical miles before Lokna. No, 53 nautical miles before Lokna. So we can also draw a little arc of 53 nautical miles. So we know here at DELAV actually we can start our descent. So DELAV is the top of descent, so it's not a very long stretch to go between Labux and DELAV. Actually, looking at the charts, okay, this is Labux and we have a section of 40 nautical miles or so before we are in DELAV. The speed, it goes quite quickly. So we're already flight level 230, that's good. I should have stopped the chrono after I reduced the thrust, but that's okay. So this one, let's see if I can clear this. Yes, that also works. That's nice. So we know now at DELAV we will do our start of our descent. Let's have a look around outside, because it's too good to be always in the cockpit. Flying over the Greek Sea, Cretan Sea in this case. On the right we still have the island of Crete. We left Heraklion more or less here. And this is Ilunda, might be well known with tourists, right next to Aios Nikolos. There's a little island of Psida. And over here we have Sitia. If you're familiar with the east side of Crete, there's also the famous palm tree beaches of Vi, which are located on this side. So it's a really nice place to also discover in Flight Simulator with smaller aircraft, of course. So this was the eastmost side of Crete. Two islands that you then see, Castle and Karpathos. And in the distance we can already see Rhodes coming up. Also on our arrival we'll see this strange setup of the flight plan. So let's go through the flight plan and see if we can remove some of the points. So this one we completed. We're not yet at DELAV, so we have some time. Lokna here. We will put in Dexas, which is our initial approach fix. It's not in the flight plan. So it will come between those 2 points. This is for the ILS approach. This is from the star, as you can see. So I click on this one, and then in the field next waypoint, I will put Dexas. Insert. And if we now look at our navigation display, we can see a little bit better that this is more of a straight line. LOKNA, Texas, and then the turn into the runway DIS Yankee approach. So here we'll disconnect the autopilot, or we'll fly this part manually by using some headings, giving it some headings, and at some point we'll do a direct to Texas to start the approach into Rhodes. Other things we can clear up. Our red navs, we don't need these red navs anymore. We can enter the Papa Alfa Romeo VOR that we'll definitely need in Rhodes approach. Also on the right hand side I will put Papa Alfa Romeo. Same one. The ILS frequency is auto-tuned, so that's correct. The course for the ILS is 245, which is also correct. So this is quite well set up. Let's have a look at our distances. Are we okay? Now we're overhead DELAV now, so we can initiate our descent to be more or less at 6,000 feet in LOKNA. So let's go to 6,000 feet and request a descent. So let's do a quick briefing again for the arrival procedure. LOKNA, we go straight on for 11 nautical miles, then we follow the arc here of 13 nautical miles around Rhodes VOR until we are in Texas. We are no lower than 4,000 feet. And Texas is here, our initial approach fix, which is this point. No, I think this will be the, yeah, this is Texas, this is the initial approach fix, not super clear here. So here we come from 4,000 feet, for here we will descend to 2,000 feet and intercept the glide slope and the localizer. Here we continue our arc of 30 nautical miles around to do the intercept. This is the Charlie India 24 Yankee point, which was in the flight plan. The Fox India 24 Yankee point, which is also in the flight plan. Then we get to the auto marker and the middle marker. So in profile view, this is more or less this would be the profile when you come from the Papa Alfa Romeo VOR and do the procedure from there as the initial approach fix, but we will do it from Texas as initial approach fix. And then we'll descend to be at 2,000 feet, 13 nautical miles of the VOR at this point, and no lower than 2,000 feet also here for the Charlie India 24 Yankee. And then from there we continue on the plateau of 2,000 feet until we intercept the glide slope at 8 DME from the VOR, and from there we descend down to the runway. Okay, quite straightforward, I would say. That's this arrival procedure here. We are officially 30 minutes with an airplane that's started. Of course, the taxi and the takeoff and so on, it's all included in those 30 minutes. So once we switch over from standard to the QNH, we'll have to put in 1018, which is the QNH of Rhodes. We can request the weather again, the METAR, just to see if there's any updated information. And when the message arrived, you will see a little line here saying company message, so then we know that the data is in. There we are. We go to receive messages, and on top is the newest METAR. So Heraklion we don't really need anymore. We can also print this and put it next to us with the sun here. I think we will not see it so well. So let's have a look at the screen. Rhodes on the 2nd of January generated 10:20 Zulu time, 320, 6 knots now, so that's also changed direction a little bit, picked up in speed, still 18 degrees, so that's fine. QNH 1017. Let's adjust that. In our performance page we go to the approach phase. QNH is now 1017. Temperature was 18 still, but the winds are 3, 20, 6 knots. The rest remains the same, so that's good. A strange drone camera here. (10,000 feet). Now the plane will start slowing down to 250 knots, so we're already at 250 knots, that's good. And below 10,000 feet we can turn on the landing lights. In front we see Rhodes. Let's also turn on the seatbelt signs. So descent checklist, MCU landing performance is reviewed, the TCOS is not yet to below, but let's put it to below. Approach briefing is completed, navigates are reviewed, anti-ice as required. Constraints are on, seatbelt signs is on. The baro will be set at the transition level. And below 10,000 feet, seatbelt signs are on, landing lights are on, wing lights are on. Descent checklist complete. We're at 7,000 feet now, so indeed, we're also almost at Lokna, so that's good planning. Here we can't go below 6,000 feet. Or not yet, at least. At this point we will turn to the right and we'll follow this arc, slowly descending to be at 4,000 feet at Texas. So yeah, we will not follow this green line here now. Alt star. So the altitude has been captured by the autopilot now. The airport of Rhodes is over here, I think. So we'll first turn around to the back of the island. So let's also switch over to the QNH now, which was 1017, the latest one. And as you can see, the flying on the QNH now, the altitude is a bit lower than what we're flying at the moment, so let's request to go to 6,000 feet. And here we'll finally follow the heading to the right. This is the highest point in Rhodes. From the map we can see that this point is about 2,627 feet high. Oh no, that might be another mountain, it might be this one over here, or that one. So we're continuing on the arc here. So we can descend to 5,000 feet when we're passing the point that's 192 or 002 from the VOR here. Let's see if we can have a look at that. .180, 195. .192 going up, so we can descend to 5,000. Now, and then we'll turn a little bit to continue on 13 DME. 30 nautical mile arc. As you can see, we're also 13.8 nautical miles now away from the VOR. It's of course because we're a bit outside of this arc. 5,000 feet coming up. You can see the windmills on top of the hill here. Let's continue the turn. So next point where we are allowed to descend will be 107 degrees from the Rhodes VOR, so it's quite close to Texas as well. Now we'll be essentially following the coast. Here's the town of Rhodes. And we'll overfly the town for our landing into the airport. Again turning left ever so slightly. Although that's quite a bank angle there. So now we can put in direct to Texas. and no longer fly with headings, but just a directed access. There we go. And let's take back the speed a little bit. To 190 knots. And we can also activate the approach phase now. So after Dexas we were okay to descend to the 2000 feet plateau. And I will already put out 1 degree of flaps. Speed check. Here's Rhodes, and we'll start our left turn in a second to intercept the ILS. Let's arm the approach. And add next flap setting. We can also put out the gears. Meantime, we see the harbor here. The runway in the distance. Let's turn on the LS. We don't see any LED lighting up here, but we do see the ILS markers. So we're on the localizer. And we're waiting to capture the glide slope. We're at 9 nautical miles from the VOR. So here at 8 nautical miles, we will probably intercept the glide slope and then
2,500.
Yeah, we're a bit high. We should have descended earlier, but okay. We'll intercept the glide slope now. Let's add the rest of the flaps. Arm the spoilers. Notify the cabin.
Flight attendants, please prepare for landing.
Turn on the nose wheel lights. Glide slope was captured. Alright, so landing checklist, if it's as required. Gears down in green. We'll put the auto brake in off low. External lights are all, nose wheel lights are take-off, auto brakes are set, spoilers are armed, flaps are landing, and landing memo no blue. 5 nautical miles from the VOR, we should have been at 1,000 feet. That's not too bad. 4, we should be at 700 feet. Or 0.14, and we're at 840, so I think there's also something wrong with the alignment here on the flight simulator. Reconfigured, flaps out, gears down.
400.
Take out the autopilot.
300.
Landing.
200. 100 above. 100. Minimum.
Continue.
50. 40. 30. 20. Retard. 10. 5.
And reverses. Auto brake. Reverses can go off, and we are 15 nautical knots, so we can take this exit here. Take in the flaps. Disarm the spoilers. Runway vacated. And let's turn off the landing lights, nose wheel light to taxi. Let's turn on the APU as well. And let's find the parking position here. There's the airport chart of Rhodes. So we exited here on Charlie. And we'll find a position to put our plane. You have the landing checklist. Landing lights is off, nose wheel lights are taxi, flaps are up, spoilers are retracted and disarmed. The weather radar, we can turn the weather radar off. And also the protective wind shear is off. TCAS off, terrain off, APU as required, wing anti-ice off, engine anti-ice as required. APU bleed on if available, and then we're rolling to the stand, so after landing checklist complete. We'll put it on the left here. Parking brake set. And engine 1 off. So yeah, welcome to Rhodes. Hope you enjoyed the flight. Hope it was good for your own flight simulation flights. If there's anything you have questions about, just let me know in the chat. Of course, I can come back to it, and if you have suggestions for other flights, of course, also let me know, and I will try to plan those in as well. Different types of approaches can also be done. So yeah, that's it. Of course, feel free to subscribe to the channel to keep updated with the different live streams that we will continue to plan here. And I hope after this morning flight you enjoy the rest of your day, and see you in the next flight.